One of the most disturbing phenomena of our time, among so many disturbing phenomena, is the politicization of religion. You almost can't separate anymore religion from politics or politics from religion, at least in this country and elsewhere. And it's a very noisy, angry, even hateful manifestation, which of course is a countersign to what religion should be, or politics for that matter. Just yesterday there was an editorial in the Times. This pastor down south in the last few days disavowed Trump and the manifestations we've seen recently. And he was overwhelmed by the amount of hate that came his way and threats on social media. So, what do we need to do? Well, we need to recover what religion is really about. And we see that in the gospel today, which is one of my favorite of all time. In this first chapter of St. John. There we see that religion is not about moral rules or dogmatic proclamations. Those come later for better and for worse. And it's certainly not about politics. Politics, this comes before and after and beyond politics. What does? Personal experience. The personal encounter with Jesus. And I'm not talking about the noisy, frothing at the mouth, Jesus is our Savior, and, the music and the manipulation and all of that. No. This is the real personal encounter, and every personal encounter that's really deep is quiet and intimate. And that's what we see in today's gospel, today's wonderful gospel. And the qualities of that encounter and how it happens and what the tone of it is the only thing that can save us personally and as a society and as a church. So John was standing John the Baptist was standing with John and Andrew, and he watched Jesus walk by. Doesn't just say, oh, he saw Jesus. He watched. So that's the first thing. And in these 7 verses, there are 6 words for seeing, as we'll see in a second. But John watched. That's contemplation. That's looking at. Really seeing. Shutting down all the other stuff, the judgment and the filters and the fears and all the other distraction which keeps us from really seeing anyone or anything, much less Jesus. And just watch. So John watched Jesus go by, and he said, first word, "Behold! Look! The Lamb of God." Wow, now that's a very different, it doesn't say, look at the great warrior, the great king. No, the Lamb. So that kind of tenderness and delicacy and fragility, that's Jesus, and that's what we can see if we behold Jesus. So the disciples heard and then followed Jesus, and Jesus turned and gazed upon them. It's a whole different word for see here. It doesn't just say he saw them. He gazed upon them. So they were invited by John to see Jesus, to behold him, and Jesus in turn gazes on them. You can't encounter anybody, much less Jesus, without really looking them in the eye and seeing them, letting themselves be revealed to you and you to them. So Jesus gazed upon them and said to them, well, what are you looking for? It's a trick question. It's kind of trying to draw them out. So, okay, what? Good question for us too. What are we looking for? What do you seek? It's not actually the word for see here, but what do you seek? What are you seeking? What are we seeking? Probably don't even know. And that's why the apostles are kind of floored, flustered by the question, and they say, Rabbi, where are you staying? Like, what hotel are you at? Something like that. They don't know really what they're asking. But the phrase in John is theological here. It's, where do you abide? Where do you live? It's the same word, abide, that comes up again and again in John's writings, the gospel and the letters. Abide in me and I in you. Where do you rest? Where do you live? Where do you abide and dwell? Where are you? Who are you? St. John of the Cross points out that really, when that question is asked, where do you abide, is in the bosom of the Father. Jesus' deepest being is buried in God, not to mention buried in the depths of the world, but through his own humanity. But the depths of God is where he lives, where he abides, where he's staying, where he dwells. So that's where John is leading us, and that's where Jesus is leading them, and leading us too. So in answer to their question, where are you staying, where are you abiding, he says, come, and you will see. So if you really do come and gaze and stay and abide with me, you will see. At last, you'll really see who Jesus is, where he dwells, who we are and where we dwell or should dwell. So they went and saw, again, the word, saw where Jesus was staying, where he abode, where he dwelt. And they abided with him that day. They stayed with him that day. They dwelt, abided, stayed, rested with him that day. And really every day after that. Because they really saw and they really stayed. They really abide. I just learned recently that the Jewish mystical word for God, one of them is hamakom, which means the dwelling place. God is where you can abide, where you can dwell, where you can be comfortable, you can rest and truly find yourself, truly exist, truly be. And that's where they stayed forever thereafter. It was about 4 p.m, it says. Literally the 10th hour, so 4 p.m. That moment was so important for them. They could remember the day and the hour where they first saw Jesus, really. Where he first saw them. Where they gazed at each other and dwelt with each other and dwelt in each other. And finally, in the gospel, well, Andrew wants to share the great news. Brings Jesus to his brother, Simon. And of course, what does Jesus do? Jesus gazed at him and said, so you're Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas, Peter, the rock. Your whole identity changes when Jesus gazes on you. Or if you prefer, you discover who you really are, your true name, your true mission, your true identity, where you really dwell, what your place is in God and in this world. You discover. That's what happens to us. You know, the prologue of St. John begins with, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." We saw that for Christmas. John's first letter begins with the same words. What was in the beginning? And then he says so beautifully, what we have heard, what we have seen, what we have touched with our hands, what we have seen, gazed upon, of the word of life. What we have seen and heard, he keeps emphasizing this, what we just heard and saw ourselves. What we have seen and heard, we share in turn with you, which is what Andrew's doing for his brother Simon. What we have seen and heard, we share in turn with you, we announce in turn to you, so that you may have fellowship with us, and so that your joy and our joy may be complete. That's the good news you want to share. That's what religion really is. Having that tender, profound, lasting encounter with Jesus and sharing that. But for that you have to be quiet, as I say. You have to really see, get all the filters out of the way. And our culture, and sometimes even our religion, our families, whatever it might be, put all sorts of filters on there. You don't see people. We see what we've been told to see. And we don't see. Or, as we just heard from the first letter of John, what we need to hear. Can we hear? Are we quiet enough to hear? That's the theme of the first reading, isn't it? Right? Samuel hears the Lord. Doesn't know what it means at first. That may happen to us. But eventually, if we're quiet enough, that's why it happens at night when he's sleeping. Otherwise, there's too much noise. Samuel, Samuel, calling out our name. Maybe our true name that we don't even know yet. In the silence, in the darkness. And what do we say? Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. How often can we truly say that? Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Whatever you want to say, whatever you want to reveal, I'm listening. How often do we really do that? That's why we need the image from the Psalm where it says, he ears open to obedience, I think is the translation. Literally, he dug ears, you dug out my ears. You took a shovel to my ears, getting out all the wax and the dirt and all the other obstructions. You dug out my ears so that I could hear you. That's what he needs to do for us. And then we'll have that authentic encounter with Jesus. And as the second reading says so well, it compares, and this is a line that is almost never quoted, and I don't know why, because it's so profound and intimate. Paul says to the Corinthians, just as a man and a woman become one flesh, so the one who is joined, glued, literally clinging to the Lord, becomes one spirit. One spirit with Jesus. We're utterly transformed. We don't just hear Jesus or see Jesus or dwell with Jesus, we become Jesus. That is to say, we become one with him and are transformed in him so that we live as he lived, as he lives even now. So how is that? How does and did Jesus live in this world? It's the same tonality that we've been talking about all along, with utmost delicacy. As we know from the gospel, on many occasions, Jesus fled politics. He wanted nothing to do with worldly power. And that was his mission, and he saw its dangers. the politics, what it could do to you. So well, how did he live? In openness, gentleness, meekness, forgiveness, healing, love, mercy, closeness to especially to all those who are marginalized and rejected and despised by church and state. Is that how we live? Is that where religion brings us? That's where Jesus brings us. Far beyond any ideology of the left or the right, ideologies which always and quickly become ferocious and rigid and merciless and cruel. But that's not Jesus. Meekness, mercy, healing, forgiveness, openness, especially to those who are despised and marginalized and rejected by church and state. Which is why he was killed by church and state, by the high priests and by the Romans. Because you can't make politics out of that. Or at least it's pretty hard to build an empire or an ideology out of openness and forgiveness and mercy and love and closeness to all those rejected and despised by church and state. But that's what we're called to do. And maybe that's why so few people do it. Why you substitute all sorts of other things, hateful websites and ideologies, even in the Catholic Church, for true spirituality and true religion, which is this. Because if you do that, you can't be co-opted by any system. And you've got to let completely go of your ego and get a whole new name, just like Cephas did. And maybe we'd rather not. Ideologies are so much more comfortable and flattering to our ego. But we'll never be happy. We'll be violent, but we'll never be happy. And we'll never make anybody else happy, the way Jesus did, and the way Jesus does. Meekness, mercy, forgiveness, healing, love, patience, and openness and closeness to those who are rejected and despised by church and state. How does that translate today? Well, listen, behold, gaze, hear, dwell, abide. And you'll find out.